Master your thinking. A practical guide to align yourself with reality and achieve tangible results in the real world. By Thibaut Meurisse. Chapter 1. Part 2. Why your current thinking is inaccurate. It's impossible to have a completely accurate vision of the world. We all fall prey to biases and tend to rely on snap judgments to make decisions. Fortunately, there are tools we can use to develop our ability to think more accurately and make better decisions. Let's review a few reasons why your thinking may be inaccurate and see what you can do about it. Poor assumptions distort your thinking. Your thinking might be inaccurate because you made or are making bad assumptions that poorly reflect the reality around you. The truth is, you make assumptions all day long. Many of these assumptions have little impact on your life, but some can have severe repercussions. As we've seen before, what you believe dictates how you think, feel, and act. Therefore, having incorrect assumptions, i.e., thinking inaccurately, will lead you to take wrong actions and achieve poor results. For this reason, you must learn to challenge your assumptions. Whenever I coach a client or interact with someone, I try to identify each negative assumption they may have. Some of which could be, you can't have it all, right? I can't make money doing this. I'm not smart enough. I need to work harder. But are these statements accurate? They may or may not be. What about you? What major assumptions are you making in your life? Each inaccurate assumption you hold onto creates limitations. The moment you believe something is impossible, it will almost never become your reality. For this reason, you must be extra careful when you make assumptions. They have real consequences in the real world. For instance, let's assume you believe that the sole purpose of your job is to pay the bills. If so, what are the odds you end up designing your dream career? I remember a conversation I had with my supervisor when working in Japan years ago. He told me that I didn't need to like my job, that I should just collect my paycheck and enjoy my free time. Perhaps he was right. Maybe a job only serves to pay the bills. But it didn't seem quite right to me at the time. I couldn't resign myself to spending the rest of my life jumping from one unfulfilling job to the next just to make ends meet. If I had bought into my boss idea, I would probably never have built a career I'm passionate about. This demonstrates how dangerous assumptions can be. Holding just one erroneous assumption can limit your possibilities and destroy your potential for growth and fulfillment. Let's have a look at one more example. Imagine one of your assumptions is that money is evil. If so, what are the chances you end up wealthy? Very slim. Why would you want to be associated with anything evil? I hope by now you understand how limiting erroneous assumptions can be. What you believe will often become your reality. So be careful what you wish for. Now, does this mean that assumptions are useless? No, they exist for a reason. Let's see why we make assumptions. 1. Why we make assumptions. Our brains need to give meaning to things and events as an attempt to understand them. This is why we can't help but interpret everything that happens to us. For instance, some of our ancestors saw natural disasters as a manifestation of God's wrath and chose to perform rituals to appease these deities. Similarly, your assumptions provide you with a framework you can use to navigate through life and make decisions. You may hold assumptions about the nature of work, the meaning of life, or the way politics works. The more accurate these are, the better decisions you'll make, and the better results you will be able to achieve. Please note, making assumptions is inevitable. Your mind automatically processes the information around you and interprets it, thereby creating a model of reality that is unique to you. Without assumptions, you have no criteria you can use to assess whether an action is relevant, which would prevent you from making any sound decision. 2. Where your assumptions come from. As detailed above, our minds generate assumptions. But have you ever wondered where these assumptions come from? Why do you hold on to some assumptions while your neighbor holds on to others? Your assumptions are part of the model of reality you've built throughout your life. To understand where they come from, we need to look in more detail at how you created your model of reality. 3. How your model of reality is created. Your model of reality encompasses all the assumptions or beliefs you rely on to give meaning to the world around you. Each of us has our own subjective model of reality, which may be more or less accurate. The beliefs that constitute your model of reality come from different sources such as your parents, your teachers, the media, newspaper, TV, internet, etc., your friends and peers, your own experiences, and your interpretation. Let's go through each one. A. Your parents. Your parents play an important part in shaping your model of reality. They do so by passing their beliefs on to you. Note that sometimes, instead of adopting your parents' beliefs, you take the opposite beliefs, whether consciously or unconsciously. For instance, witnessing your parents' penny pinching may lead you to spend your money frivolously or even fall into debt. Having strict parents may lead you to become more lenient with your own children. In short, you tend to mimic your parents or do the exact opposite. Now, it's up to you to look closer at the beliefs you inherited and change them as and when necessary. B. Your teachers. School also influences your model of reality through the interaction you have with your teachers and classmates. No matter how neutral your teachers intend to be, they have their own vision of the world. The beliefs transmitted to you during your school years will depend on a variety of factors, such as the type of school you attended, your teachers and classmates, or the country you lived in, among other factors. In short, school isn't neutral. It influences your beliefs and shapes your ongoing model of reality. C. The media. Media also has a huge influence. TV channels, newspapers, and other media outlets have their own agenda and biases. For instance, they tend to report negative events such as riots, crimes, or natural disasters while ignoring positive news. Why? Because bad news sells. This can lead you to believe the world is a worse place than it actually is. Try completing the following sentence. In the last 20 years, the proportion of the world population living in extreme poverty has A. Almost doubled. B. Remained more or less the same. C. Almost halved. The correct answer is C. Almost halved. Did you get it right? Only 4% of French, 5% of American, and 9% of British people did. This information was taken from Hans Rosling's book, Factfulness. In his book, Rosling demonstrates that, contrary to what many of us believe, in many aspects things are improving the world over. The point is, what's reported on the news isn't truly representative of the actual state of the world. Now, why does this matter? Because misinterpreting reality comes with real-world consequences. For instance, believing the world is worse than it is may lead you to lose hope. As a result, you may not bother taking any action to improve it. Your inaccurate perception of the world may also lead you to waste a lot of time and effort addressing the wrong problems while ignoring more urgent issues. This is the cost of having an inaccurate model of reality. It's not just theory. D. Your friends and peers. Your friends, colleagues, and peers will inevitably influence your perception of the world. If you're not careful, pessimistic people will kill your dreams. On the other hand, positive people will inspire you, increasing the odds you'll accomplish great things, sometimes far beyond anything you can imagine. To learn how to surround yourself with positive people and design a more empowering environment, refer to the section Designing an Empowering Environment in Part 3 of this book. E. Your own experiences. Everything you experience, whether positive or negative, is feedback from reality. In other words, as you take action in the real world, you receive valuable information from the reality around you. The feedback you receive may confirm what you previously thought, or it may refute it, forcing you to revise your original model. For instance, you may believe you did an excellent job with your homework only to receive a bad grade from your teacher. This feedback from reality will force you to revise your stance and take the necessary action to improve your performance, e.g., take extra classes, ask your friends for help, etc. The more action you take, the more feedback you receive, and the more opportunities you have to make better assumptions and refine your model of reality. F. Your interpretation. Experience is a great teacher. However, what shapes your model of reality isn't only what you experience, but also the way you interpret it. And the way you interpret your experiences is based on the assumptions you hold. By learning to make better assumptions, you'll give more constructive meaning to your experiences. This, in turn, will lead you to take smarter actions and produce better results. For example, if you assume every setback you face moves you closer to your goals, you'll be more inclined to learn from your mistakes rather than be disheartened by them. However, if you see setbacks as a sign that you're not capable enough, you'll likely avoid making mistakes which will hamper your growth. Similarly, if you assume people have good intentions, you'll interpret situations more positively than if you believe these same people want to take advantage of you. Now that we've seen how your assumptions are made and how they contribute to creating your model of reality, let's have a look at common biases that further distort your thinking. B. 5 common biases that distort your thinking. As human beings, we're prone to fall prey to a variety of biases. This is just how our brain works. To become a better thinker, you must become acutely aware of the major biases you may be the victim of. Now, it's not possible to be completely unbiased. To do so, you would have to be aware of your thoughts 24/7, which would demand far more energy than you have. However, during key moments that require you to make sound decisions, you can make yourself more aware of your biggest biases. In this section, we'll review some of the major biases that may lead you to think inaccurately. We'll see how you can overcome these biases and sharpen your thinking to place you in a better position to achieve your goals. The biases we will cover are: 1. The self-serving bias. 2. The sunk cost fallacy. 3. The planning fallacy. 4. The survivorship bias. And 5. The Dunning-Kruger Effect. 1. Self-serving bias. This is when you attribute your successes to your skills, but attribute your failures to bad luck. This bias leads you to obsess over the outcome while paying scant attention to the process. When the outcome is favorable, you assume the process is right, although it may not be. When the outcome is unfavorable, you call yourself unlucky, even though you may have followed the correct process. We have to admit that luck plays a role in many situations, especially in the short term. Therefore, merely looking at the immediate outcome can be misleading. Instead, you must pay close attention to the process and keep refining it by analyzing case studies, experimenting, and learning from feedback. You must strive to identify the correct actions. By taking the right actions repeatedly, you'll increase the chances of striking it lucky at some point. How to deal with self-serving bias. To avoid being a victim of this bias, put emphasis on the process. Focus on what you need to do every day to maximize your chances of achieving your long-term goals. Avoid assuming your process is effective just because you obtained good short-term results. Instead, keep working on refining it over time. Never assume you know it all. Stay open-minded and listen to the feedback you receive from the people around you. 2. The sunk cost fallacy. To think accurately, you must assess the actions you're taking today based on their sole ability to get you where you want to be. Too often, people fall for what is called the sunk cost fallacy. That is, they make decisions based on their past actions rather than on the present. They let the time, money, and energy they've spent in the past influence their decisions. However, from a logical point of view, everything they did in the past is largely irrelevant. Here are some examples of how the sunk cost fallacy works. Having spent months or years working on your business, you decide to keep going even though you should probably give up and move on to another venture. Having spent hundreds of dollars on your book cover, you refuse to change it even though it's hindering your sales. Having been in a relationship for years, you refuse to move out of it even though it might be best for you both in the long term. In all the examples above, you choose to maintain the status quo because of a variety of factors from the past while ignoring what your present self really wants. By doing so, you neglect your present self and act against the interests of the future self you want to become. To guard yourself against the sunk cost fallacy, You can practice what is called zero-based thinking. To do so, ask yourself the following question. Knowing what I now know, would I still today? For example, knowing what I now know, would I still start that business today? Knowing what I now know, would I still take that job today? Knowing what I now know, would I still buy that book cover today? Knowing what I now know, would I still start that relationship today? If your answer is no, it indicates your present self wants something else. Another way to overcome sunk cost fallacy is to learn to value your future self more highly. There is no need to please your past self anymore, but your future self is counting on you to make the best decisions today to maximize your happiness tomorrow. Ask yourself this question. If you were your future self 5 years from now, what would you want your present self to do for you today? 3. Planning fallacy. We're terrible at planning. When we think of something we'd like to achieve, we fail to consider all the things that could go wrong. This is why many projects are delayed or end up costing far more than originally planned. Thinking accurately entails making better forecasts to help you create more realistic plans. When you hold on to unrealistic expectations, you might feel demotivated when things don't turn out as planned. You may even believe that you aren't smart enough and that something is wrong with you. By failing to deliver on what you promised, you may also get into trouble with your customers. How to overcome planning fallacy. One of the best ways to avoid falling prey to the planning fallacy is to get into the habit of giving yourself more time to complete your tasks or projects. A good idea is to double the time you think you'll need to finish a given project. For long-term projects, ask yourself what could go wrong. Look at similar projects you've completed in the past and see what problems you encountered and how much time and effort it took to solve them. Alternatively, look for similar projects completed by other people or companies and use them as benchmarks. Then once you come up with your schedule and budget, add an extra buffer. 4. Survivorship bias. Survivorship bias is when we only look at the success stories but fail to take into account all the failures that don't make the headlines. This bias can give us the impression that our chances of success are much higher than they really are. To give you an example, for every startup that succeeds, hundreds fail. In other words, trying to discover the key to success by observing successful entrepreneurs might not always be useful. A big part of their success could be the result of luck. After all, if we take a large enough pool of hardworking entrepreneurs, some of them are bound to end up being successful, right? The point here is not to tell you that everything is due to luck, but to help you understand the concept of probabilities so that you are better able to align your thinking with reality. The good news is that luck tends to become less relevant over the long term. This means, if you manage to think fairly well, construct an effective model of reality, and act on it consistently, you're more likely to end up getting lucky at some stage. In Part 3, Empowering Your Model of Reality, we'll discuss what you can do to engineer more luck and further boost your odds of success. How to deal with survivorship bias. For whatever goal you want to reach, read everything you can about the people who succeed. Try to understand what they did to succeed and what their thought process was during their climb. But don't stop there. Look at the people who failed to achieve that same goal and try to find out why they failed. Then answer the following questions. What are all the reasons I could fail? What could prevent me from reaching that goal? Challenges you face could be external obstacles, such as a lack of resources, or they could be internal obstacles, such as limiting beliefs or a lack of resourcefulness. To conclude, learn both from success stories and from failures. This is how you can refine your model of reality and increase the odds of achieving your goals. 5. Dunning-Kruger Effect. Have you noticed that people who know the least sometimes seem to be the most confident? That's the taxi driver who tells you which stocks to pick, the hairdresser who claims to have the solution to complex political issues, or the bartender who teaches you how to run your business. This bias has been named the Dunning-Kruger Effect, from the psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger who demonstrated this bias through experiments. As you work toward your goal, one major problem you face is that you don't know what you don't know. This leads you to believe you know more than you actually do, which can create serious issues. As a result, you might become complacent instead of learning more about your goal and refining your assumptions. How to deal with the Dunning-Kruger effect. To minimize the consequences of this bias, be willing to question your approach. Continuously learn from feedback and remain humble no matter how experienced you may think you are. Your ability to question everything and your willingness to learn will enable you to refine your model of reality over time. The moment you think you know it all is when your downfall begins, whether you realize this or not. We'll discuss the importance of being humble and learning from feedback in greater depth in the section, how your ego affects your thinking, and in part 2. Aligning yourself with reality. C. How your ego affects your thinking. Your ego also plays an important part when it comes to developing accurate thinking. Your ego may lead you to refuse to ask for help, live in denial, avoid failures, or blame other people or circumstances. Such an attitude will severely hamper your ability to perform at your best and achieve your goals. In this book, we'll define ego as the identity you believe you must protect to maintain your current sense of self. You might think of it as pride. To improve your thinking, you must let go of your ego. You must be willing to admit when you're wrong. The more you can do so, the more you'll be able to learn and refine your model of reality. Conversely, the more you try to hold on to the idea that you are right, the less you'll learn and the more you risk being out of alignment with reality. Denying reality often leads to mediocrity. By trying to be right, you'll make it much harder to improve. Now, there are several ways your ego can prevent you from achieving the results you want. An ego out of control might result in you 1. Living in denial. 2. Refusing to ask for help. 3. Avoiding failures. Or 4. Blaming other people or external circumstances. 1. Living in denial. To construct a better model, you must see reality as it is, even when it hurts. You must accept that for things to change, you will have to change. And from your ego's perspective, that's scary. Unfortunately, being so attached to the way you've always done things might make you unwilling to change your approach. However, failing to look at your issues objectively will prevent you from making the necessary changes in your life. To give you an example, for months I refused to calculate how much I was making in book royalties. I was too afraid to look at the truth. After quitting my job to write full-time, I decided to confront reality. I needed to treat writing as a business, and I started by looking at the numbers. After factoring in editing, proofreading, advertising, and all my other costs, I discovered I was actually losing money. Facing that truth enabled me to start making better business decisions and to improve my results over time. What about you? In what ways are you living in denial? Which areas are you closing your eyes to? The first step to change anything is to assess the current situation with as much objectivity as possible. Are you willing to do so? 2. Refusing to ask for help. Do you ask for help, or do you always try to figure out things on your own? Many of us are afraid to admit when we need help. We don't want to look bad. We dread letting others know how ignorant or inept we are. However, failing to do so can generate a lot of suffering in our lives. Not to mention that this type of behavior can hinder our progress. When you fail to ask for help, you risk making decisions that will cost you time and energy. For instance, you may spend hours trying to figure out how to create a blog when you could have asked one of your tech-savvy friends. If you know someone who could give you the information you need or teach you invaluable skills, why not let go of your ego and ask for help? The point is, it's not only okay to ask for help, it's also often essential. If you don't know something, ask. Most successful people willingly ask for help, so why wouldn't you? By asking more questions, you learn better and faster, which enables you to refine your model of reality over time. Now, there are a few reasons you may be afraid of asking, which could include pride, the fear of bothering people, or the belief you should figure things out for yourself. Let's briefly go over each of them. A pride. Are you afraid of letting others know how much you are struggling? Do you fear losing face? If that's the case, realize that allowing yourself to be vulnerable will often let you create deeper and more intimate connections with the people around you. Seeking help is not a sign of weakness. It shows that you are willing to grow and open yourself to others. This is what strong people do. Fear of bothering people. If you're like me, you may not want to bother people with your problems. Perhaps you feel bad because they're busy, or perhaps you think you're not important enough to take up other people's time. If so, this may be a sign that you don't value yourself highly enough. Start noticing these situations and challenge yourself to bother others just a little bit more than you currently feel comfortable with. Also, don't forget that most people are happy to help. We generally love showcasing our expertise. We want to feel useful. So why not bother people from time to time? It might feel slightly uncomfortable, but it's a healthy practice that can help you value yourself more. C. The belief you should figure things out for yourself. Perhaps you believe you should figure things out all by yourself. This can be a good thing as it stimulates your creativity and develops your resourcefulness, a key element to achieving a higher level of success. However, there are also times when you are far better off asking for support. You can't afford the luxury of reinventing the wheel every time you attempt something new. If the people around you have skills and knowledge you can benefit from, why not ask for their guidance? Before I attended business school back in 2013, I didn't know anything about business and could barely use a spreadsheet. Too ashamed to reveal my poor skills, I would let others create spreadsheets during group work, or I would find ways to get them to share their files with me. This behavior not only prevented me from honing my skills, but also made me feel inadequate. This is a pattern I've seen play out many times in my life. It works as follows. I assume I should know how to do something, even though I have no experience doing it. I feel ashamed of myself for not knowing how to do it. I try hard to hide my inadequacy while feeling terrible about myself. Not asking for help, I struggle to improve. The skill gap between me and others further widens, and I end up feeling even worse about myself. I believe this is a pattern that many people with low self-esteem go through. So, if the above process sounds familiar, notice it. And remember, it doesn't have to be that way. Most successful people reach out for help. They recognize it as the best way to attain better results faster. They also understand that mutual help is a wonderful way to create deeper and more meaningful relationships with their spouses, kids, friends, or colleagues. It makes them feel part of a community. In short, by not asking for help, you risk feeling isolated and powerless. Almost inevitably, some people out there have the answer to your question. Why not find them and ask for their support? This might be the smartest and most mature thing you can do. 3. Avoiding failure. Are you afraid of failure? Are you scared of looking bad? Failing means you're trying something new, and your ego usually doesn't like that. It prefers maintaining the status quo. However, to achieve any meaningful goal, you'll have to grow. If you were already the person you needed to be to reach your goals, you would already have achieved them, wouldn't you? But you haven't. Change is the only constant in this world. Everything either grows or decays. If you don't maintain your house, it will eventually fall apart. If you don't grow your business, you'll lose market share to your competitors, and if you don't make an effort to improve, you'll tend to become worse. Therefore, to grow and move toward your ideal life, you need to challenge yourself by experimenting with new things. This entails a willingness to fail. There is no such thing as failure. Many people try to avoid failing at all costs, but this is not how to design your ideal life. The most successful people on this planet understand the value of failure. They are willing to fail as many times as necessary until they achieve their goals. In truth, failure is something to use, not to avoid. Failure is the feedback mechanism you need to refine your model of reality. You need failures so that you can adjust your trajectory and hit your goals. The same way that pain tells you something is wrong with your body, failures tell you something might be off with your approach. As you learn to see failures as feedback from reality, you'll find it easier to persevere until you reach your final destination. Note that failure isn't personal. You don't fail. You tried something that didn't work. If it didn't work, try something else. Ask for feedback. Consult experts. Find a mentor. Tweak your plan. Or try just one more time. The bottom line is, stop being afraid of failure. Use every single one of your so-called failures to refine your model of reality. And keep adjusting your trajectory until you travel from where you are now to where you want to be in the future. 4. Blaming other people and circumstances. Another tendency you might have is to play the victim. The problem is, when you act like a victim, you rob yourself of an opportunity to take more responsibility for your life and make positive changes. Being a victim means you abandon your power and give it away to other people or circumstances. A good way to explain victimhood is to imagine a spectrum with personal responsibility on the far left side and blame on the far right side. The more you take personal responsibility, the less you blame other people or external circumstances, and vice versa. These concepts are mutually exclusive. So why do you like to play the victim? Being a victim probably enables you to maintain the illusion you're right, your ego hates being wrong, and allows you to do nothing about your situation. Accepting the idea that you may be partly responsible would force you to do something, which may require a lot of time and energy. Now, I'm not saying other people or circumstances are never obstacles standing between you and your goals. What I am saying is that the more you seek responsibility for everything that happens to you, the more you empower yourself and the better chance you have to improve your situation. For instance, blaming your lack of success on a difficult childhood will not help you design your ideal future. On the other hand, by being willing to ask yourself what you can do about your current situation, you'll come up with a variety of actions you can start taking today. Part of thinking accurately entails acknowledging the idea that you have the power to change your life. And this starts by focusing on what you can do rather than looking for who or what is to blame. This is how you can achieve tangible results in the real world. D. How your emotions distort your thinking. Inaccurate thinking can also be the result of a disempowering emotional state. Our emotions can distort both our thinking and the way we behave. For instance, when you feel good about yourself, you are more creative and have more energy to take the actions needed to achieve your goals. Conversely, when you're feeling like a failure, you have no motivation and invite in more and more negative thinking. In this negative condition, everything seems gloomy and you're unable to think clearly or make sound decisions. In short, when you're under the spell of negative emotions, you tend to lose your sense of perspective. Therefore, if you want to develop accurate thinking, you need to learn how to manage your emotions more effectively. 1. Key characteristics of negative emotions. Below are some characteristics of negative emotions you need to be aware of. Negative emotions act as a spell. When you're under the influence of negative emotions, it might seem impossible to break free from them. You may feel the urge to focus on the same disempowering thoughts repeatedly. Negative emotions filter your experiences. Negative emotions act as a filter that taints the quality of your experiences. During a negative episode, you perceive every experience through this filter. Although the world outside may remain the same, you will experience it in a completely different way based on how you feel. For instance, when you're sad, you might not enjoy the food you eat, the movie you see, or the activities in which you engage. You only see the negative side of things and end up feeling trapped and powerless. On the other hand, when you're in a positive mood, everything in life appears better. Food tastes great, you're naturally friendlier, and you enjoy all the activities you partake in. C. Negative emotions attract more negative emotions. When you're in a negative emotional state, you will begin to attract more emotions on a similar wave, i.e., more negative emotions. For instance, you might be in a bad mood because your boss yelled at you at work. This may lead you to think about some issues you have with your partner. You may then remember your back pain and start obsessing over it. As a result, you will feel even worse. 2. 4 tips to help you overcome emotional traps. By now, you understand that your emotions can distort your thinking. If you don't keep them under control, they will wreak havoc in your life. To manage your emotions more effectively, I encourage you to do the following. Tip number 1. Recognize the idea that you are not your emotions. Your emotions can never define you. For instance, being sad for months doesn't make you a lesser person than you were when you were happy. Emotions are like clouds hiding the sun. The sun is always there. You are the sun. Sure, your emotions can trick you beyond anything you can imagine, and they will, but they cannot change your essence. Tip number 2. Refrain from clustering negative emotions together. Negative emotions attract more negative emotions. Thus, start noticing whenever you start clustering issues together, e.g., having back pain, hating your job, and being in the middle of an argument with your partner. Then look at each issue separately. By doing so, you will realize that, when taken independently, these issues might not be as big an issue as you thought, or they are at least more manageable. Don't stack negative thoughts together. Instead, compartmentalize them and deal with them individually. Tip number 3. Avoid making important decisions when under the spell of strong emotions. Your emotions distort your thinking. This goes for both negative and positive emotions. Consequently, avoid making any major decisions when you're experiencing highs, feeling ecstatic, or lows, feeling depressed, hopeless, angry, etc. Instead, wait until you revert to a more neutral emotional state. You'll think much more clearly and will make better decisions as a result. For example, don't decide to give up on your dreams when you feel depressed. Wait until you feel better before making such important decisions. Don't reply to an email that makes you angry. Instead, wait at least 24 hours. Don't make any promises or major decisions just after receiving great news, e.g., winning the lottery. If you avoid making any serious decisions when under the spell of emotions, it will save you a lot of trouble. Tip number 4. Cultivate self-compassion. How often do you make yourself miserable by figuratively beating yourself up? The worst time to do so is when you already feel bad. This is why I like to adopt what I call the "I'll beat myself up later" policy. In other words, I give myself permission to be hard on myself later, but not when I'm in a negative emotional state. Instead, I show myself some much-needed compassion. That's what I encourage you to do as well. We'll discuss how to cultivate self-compassion in greater depth in Part 3, Empowering Your Model of Reality. Use the tips above to help you manage your emotions better, and you'll be able to make better life decisions. Now, let's explore additional ways you distort your thinking by reviewing common negative thought patterns. 3. 3 common negative thought patterns to avoid. As human beings, we all fall prey to a certain number of negative thought patterns. Understanding these patterns will help you manage your emotions further and ensure you think more clearly. Thought pattern number 1. Generalization. This is when you oversimplify things instead of having a more nuanced approach. You can often tell when you generalize by noticing your use of such words as always or never. Some examples are: always. I'm always late. I'm always wrong. I'm always the one who. Why does it always happen to me? Never. I will never be happy again. I never get things right. I will never be able to find a job like this one. Have you ever made any of the above statements? This type of generalization is not only inaccurate, it also leads you to feel bad about yourself. You're not always late, are you? You may be late more often than you'd like to be, but you're also on time on many occasions. Yes, bad things may happen to you occasionally, but this is not the default position. Many other people face similar issues, and some probably more than you. Take note of whenever you use words such as always or never, because they often indicate you're distorting the truth. You may do this to elicit sympathy or to avoid taking responsibility for your current situation. In any case, generalizing behavior such as this distorts your thinking and hampers you from achieving your future goals. Thought pattern number 2. All or nothing thinking. This is another toxic pattern you may be falling for. All or nothing thinking is when you believe you need to get something, or you'll be unhappy, unworthy of love, etc. All or nothing thinking is when you believe your own happiness depends on a specific event external to you. Some examples are, I will only be happy when I get that job. If I can't achieve that goal, my life is not worth living. I need to marry that person or I will never be happy. This is a distortion of the way life works. To live a successful and happy life, there isn't one specific thing you need to do, to be, or to have. You're not just given one shot in life. In truth, your lifelong dream that fails to materialize might actually open doors to new opportunities you didn't even know existed. That dream job you didn't get may lead you to a new exciting career you didn't even think possible. Being rejected by the person you thought was your one true love may lead you to meet someone even more amazing. Life isn't an all-or-nothing event. This is an inaccurate way of thinking. When you find yourself making your happiness or self-worth dependent on one event, thing, or person, take note. Remember, there are always opportunities out there. And to be happy, there is no specific thing you need to do or to have. If one thing doesn't work, something else will. So never lose your enthusiasm and avoid beating yourself up when things don't work out. Instead, keep believing in yourself, keep appreciating all the things you already have, and keep doing your best. Thought pattern number 3, dramatization. Dramatization is when you imagine things are far worse than they actually are. We all exaggerate things from time to time, don't we? We make a big deal of things that aren't. This is especially true when we are tired, ill, or a little down. However, dramatization is inaccurate thinking. Imagine that your boss just yelled at you. You now picture yourself being fired. Before realizing it, you've created a mental movie of yourself being homeless. You see your wife abandoning you, and you become scared. This is a little bit of an exaggeration, isn't it? It seems as though you've skipped a whole lot of steps that would need to happen for you to find yourself in that situation. This type of thinking probably happens because of the way our brain works. Our brain is designed to give a lot of weight to potential threats, which is how we were able to survive as a species. To survive and reproduce, our ancestors needed to identify any and every threat. When in doubt, they would assume the worst. It made more sense for them to mistake a piece of wood for a snake than the opposite. Unfortunately, our brains still work the same way today. So be aware of your natural tendency to envision the worst. Thank your ancestors. You wouldn't be here if it weren't for their survival skills, and think more rationally and positively. Most of the things you worry about will never happen.